Content over everything.
I followed this very carefully. I'm very interested in war and peace. That's one of my main things I come to speak about, speak as Faren. So you can trust that at least I care about what's happening. They attacked those air bases, one near Ghouta and one near Damascus. And yes, they might not have killed civilians, but you know what happens when you attack a state like that? It gives the dictator more of an excuse to be even more dictatorial. Take, for example, Russia. When Russia was moving towards dictatorship in the early 20th century, they used the excuse of Western aggression to actually become even more dictatorial. They thought, well, look, the West is attacking us now. Let's become even more, let's clamp down more on our civilians.
It's easy to radicalize people that way.
Most of you probably are against airstrikes in Syria anyways, so I'm not trying to tell you to take a certain position on that. I'm assuming most of you are against it, but I am trying to get you to go tomorrow outside Parliament Square, or at Parliament Square, outside Parliament, at 5:30 p.m. Stop the War Coalition have organised a demonstration, and you really should go, because it may not change Theresa May's mind, but it'll at least show that the British public is definitely against the bombing of of Syria. They're definitely against that. It'll have a powerful effect. It'll show Theresa May she can't distract the British people from her failings in the recent general elections and her growing unpopularity in her own party. That we can all see that. And creating a foreign crisis and looking like a strong man against Russia is not going to save her from that. Okay, we're still going to see that she's failing as a prime minister. It will give a very clear message that the British people don't want to have this done in their name. They don't want to have Syria be even more interfered with. This idea that I read a Guardian article saying, the fact that we're not intervening in Syria is a real danger. We've got an obligation. We've already intervened in Syria, supporting the FSA, for example. That the Free Syrian Army would go around raping and pillaging. It's one of the main reasons a big section of the Syrian population turned to ISIS to restore order. Similarly to when they turned to Taliban in Afghanistan to restore some order. They weren't necessarily Islamist themselves, this part of the population, but they wanted some kind of law and order. We got to take into account we've already interfered in Syria. And Theresa May says, we're doing this for humanitarian concerns. Don't be brought in by that. Don't be brought in there. But if the UK government really cared about humanitarian concerns, we would have stopped selling weapons to the Saudis, stopped giving them training, so that they can continue bombing Yemen, which is the worst, according to the UN, the worst humanitarian disaster right now.
And after that, we give them 3 million.
We would have, if the British government really cared about humanitarian concerns.
And you wouldn't have 100,000 in the prison.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
How many people in the prison in England?
How many people in prison in England?
100,000.
100 more. If you are very human, you wouldn't have that.
This is not the topic I'm talking about today. I'm talking about our interventions
but that
overseas.
is humanitarian.
Talk about there is a problem with incarceration in Britain.
100,000 people.
I mean, under Tony Blair, I can't remember how many new laws were added to the statute books to criminalise behaviour. That is a problem. But I'm here to talk about war and peace, and how Britain is actually making the Middle Eastern region even worse by bombing Syria. It's not going to help. Look what happened in Libya. The country is in ruins now. Whatever you think of Gaddafi or any of these dictators, you have to realize that there are alternatives to bombing. There are alternatives. Don't listen to Theresa May when she says there are no alternatives. There are. There are alternatives to illegal airstrikes. There are. There's attempts at diplomatic settlement. Now, Russia didn't offer as good a diplomatic settlement as Britain and Iraq and the US and France did. But it did actually call for an independent investigation into those chemical attacks. It did actually call for that, and we turned them down. Britain helped to veto that in the UN. Britain has a very big responsibility because it's one of the members of the Security Council. And to be honest, I don't think we deserve that position. Some people think, why does Britain have that position when maybe someone like India deserves it because of its large population? I think there are much better reasons you could say why Britain doesn't deserve that position in the UN Security Council. I've just talked about how we bombed Libya illegally and put troops on the ground there, despite what David Cameron said. We did. We're complicit in the atrocities happening in Yemen right now. The case of Iraq is self-explanatory. I don't have to explain. It was completely illegal. Now, Theresa May is saying we can intervene on humanitarian grounds. You can't legally do that. It's very, very impractical. Aside from being morally questionable, it's impractical because you're breaking the law. The international law says you can only intervene in self-defense or after the UN is resolved to allow it. Neither of those things have happened. And not only does Theresa May have contempt for you, as the British people, she has contempt for Parliament and parliamentary sovereignty. She hasn't asked Parliament
Do you
what they
agree,
think
though,
about this.
in world history we've needed wars to make peace?
No.
Are we today in a peaceful country?
Outside the
because
exception
wars?
of outside
Yes.
the section of the Second World War, which is worth discussing. It's a very complicated case.
Yeah, but are we in peace
Outside of
today
that,
because
I
the
don't
war?
think so.
You
Sorry?
don't think that you're not standing in Speaker's Corner, not under a Nazi flag of Germany because of a war?
Again, it's a difficult case to make. I think there are some people that said there were non-violent tactics we could have used against Hitler.
I believe it's in the human psyche that we sometimes have to have wars to create a peace.
Anybody who argues from human nature that we have to have wars to create peace,
clearly we
you have
do,
to be
because
very
we're doing them all the
skeptical.
time.
Anybody who talks about anything happening because of human nature, it's worth being very skeptical. Especially since human nature is a product of an interaction with our environment.
Correct.
We're not a blank slate. We have genetics, and we have to take that into account. We have certain biological impulses, but that they can only be harnessed a certain way depending on our social situation. We're deeply social creatures.
What I'm trying to make out, though, is that within us, there must be something innate in us because we are a quarrelling being. We quarrel, right? And we've got agendas. The agendas are in here, okay? And those agendas manifest themselves on a national geopolitical situations. So what I'm saying is, to say that we shouldn't always have wars, but sometimes we've had in history and proved it, we've had wars that have then created peace.
I'm not making a general argument against war here. All right, I'm not actually anti-war myself. I think there are some cases where maybe war is justified.
So
I'm not
what's
against
the right
violence
to
in
Syria
principle.
and
I think there are cases where violence can be justified. I'm against Theresa May's decision to bomb Syria, and I'm urging all of you here today to go to the demonstration
She
tomorrow.
didn't bomb Syria, she bombed chemical plants in Syria. She didn't bomb
Again, if you were
Syria.
here at the beginning of my speech, that in itself is enough to give Assad more of an excuse to
Maybe.
clamp down on the
But
Syrian
what do you
people.
think?
When you can, when
Would
you
rather
say,
put him backwards for a bit with his
Sorry?
chemical thing, or would you rather leave the chemical plants there?
well, put it this way: Britain has actually helped to give them chemical. We've helped to give chemical
Forget
weapons to
that.
Syria
Would you
before,
rather leave the
before
chemical plants there
2012.
or get rid of them? What's a safer bet?
What's the safer bet?
Get rid
A
of them.
diplomatic solution, trying to find
But you
trying to
tried-
create a
we
regional
tried a diplomatic
ceasefire.
How do you know there was a
How do you know? We haven't
Doesn't
tried.
work, hasn't worked.
We have. It does work. If you
Apparently
actually
they cleared
take,
them
for
all
example,
off.
the IRA. When Britain was dealing with the IRA, it started on a very violent approach by terrorizing.
It's a very violent war.
It was very no, and the British government were incredibly violent towards them. When they realised it didn't work after the IRA, almost blew up the entire government. When they realised it didn't work, they turned to a diplomatic solution. Now the situation in Ireland's not perfect. In Belfast, there's still a lot of ethnic tension and religious tension, but it's much better than it was before I was born. The solution is not violence. Adding more violence is never the solution in this case. It's not going to work. Adding more violence is not going to work.
Okay, going back to the argument that did Theresa May require parliamentary's approval before carrying out the bombing? But does she really need it? Because our commander-in-chief is the Queen. Doesn't she just need the approval
Yeah,
from
well,
the Queen?
I'm not an expert in the British Constitution, but I can say that if you want to look like a legitimate leader, if you want to be practically, seen as a legitimate, you're going to ask Parliament at the very least, if not the British people. We had a referendum on Brexit, which is comparatively a very minor issue compared to helping further aggression in the Middle East, right? Why can't we have a referendum on this, or something similar at least? And I'm not a believer that referendums are the be-all and end-all of democracy.
Of chemical attacks are carrying on while you're calling the referendum. The element of surprise issue at the end of the day is relevant.
The element
here.
of surprise, I'm sorry, that's a terrible argument, because you know why? The US has to notify Russia before it organise those airstrikes, and Russia obviously is going to... Hold on. Russia's... Hold on. Russia's...
Do you
Can I
think
say-
Russia-
can I respond?
Do you think Russia
Listen,
was
at
involved in
Speaker's
this?
Corner, I try and let people have a chance to speak, and I try and get my point of view across as well. It doesn't have to be either or. The thing with Russia is that Russia, having been notified by the United States, is going to notify Iran and Syria, right? And Syria's, it evacuated those areas that were going to be bombed. So there's no element of surprise, I'm sorry.
No, what I'm saying though is at the end of the day, if we went for a referendum, I mean this country's gone for a referendum on Brexit, now look what's going on here. The issue is, so you can't have a referendum on all these every single issue. If you vote in a government, the government has to make those decisions. The Prime Minister has the right to make that decision. Whether it's right or wrong, which I will go with you, will be seen by the course of history. We'll see whether that was right or wrong. Now what you might find, if it brings a new order there, or something happens, you might be turning around in 2 weeks' time telling me, standing on there saying she did a fantastic thing.
Theresa May actually said explicitly, she said this is not about regime change, this is not about intervening in a civil war.
Why do you think that was?
Well, because she knows how the British people perceive Tony Blair today. She knows how they see him. She knows how much distaste a lot of British people have for Tony Blair. And she wants to avoid making that kind of mistake again.
Deal with Russia. Russia was happy for the chemical.
I'll tell you what we should
It's a distraction. Theresa May did terribly in the last general election. She barely held on to power. And like I said, she's become growingly unpopular with her own party, the Tory party. And the Tory party is a vicious party. Look at how they dealt with Thatcher after the poll tax affair. They just got rid of her, right? They don't stand, they're a very vicious party. They're not going to stand for someone like Theresa May, making them unpopular. So she's using this foreign crisis as a distraction. And if there are any French people here in the audience today, there might be. There are a lot of French people come to Speaker's Corner. I'll say this to you as well. Macron is doing something very similar. Macron's neoliberal assault on train drivers and so on in France has resulted in mass strikes and student unrest. And he's trying to create a distraction from that. He's trying to appear like a strong leader by facing off against Russia. Now there are a lot more serious things at stake here than the Syrian people. That's enough of a moral argument, adding more suffering to the Syrian people. But you know what? It might genuinely escalate into nuclear war. I'm a very big believer, and you cannot win a nuclear war. You cannot. This once great city might be off the map pretty soon. If the violence escalates, I mean, it's like Peter Ford said, the ex-British ambassador. Excuse me, sorry, I never have meetings within a meeting at Speaker's Corner. Sorry. I never have.
He's having a wobble diarrhea.
Do you know what I think? I think a lot of people watch TV and they think it's like TV coming to Speaker's Corner. They can just.
Well, it happens. You know what happens.
Sorry, I'm President Trump. He's a very erratic president, and I'm worried that our government is more interested in supporting or going along with what he wants than we're supporting Parliament or what the British people want. That's what I'm very worried about.
I like him. You know,
2 weeks ago he said he was going to take out all those troops from Syria. Now he is. And you know, even Tucker Carlson, the right-wing, I think he's on Fox News. Even he provided a very good case against going to war. You know, I think it's very interesting. There are even elements of the American right that are starting to ask questions about the administration and what they're doing. Yeah, exactly.
Didn't Trump stand on
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't do any intervention.
You got to remember,
Go to the demonstration tomorrow.
You got to remember, the American people vote to their mints, so you know.
There's a very conservative idea of democracy that once you vote in a leader, then they should be able to do whatever they want because you've given them that mandate.
Because
I don't think that's a very wise course of action. If you want to live in a real democracy, you hold your leaders to account even when they're in power and you voted them in.
Yes.
It's not a matter of we voted them in so they can now do whatever they want.
Anymore. It's 51 versus 49. That's what it is these days.
I saw a very worrying article in I think it was either BBC or Sky, or it was an interview with an MP saying we should let Theresa May have the freedom to act, right? That we shouldn't reduce her freedom to act as a person, but she should be seen as an agent of the people, not the other way around. You know, she shouldn't be seen as someone. She should be given the bare minimum of freedom to do what she wants. That's how a real accountable system works.
She's
All right.
not a Brexiteer, but she's having to fulfill.
You know, so go to the demonstration tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. There'll be a demonstration outside Parliament Square.
Breaking news, Sky. Donald Trump just said mission accomplished with the airstrikes.
No, he said that yesterday.
He said that yesterday, yeah.
No, he said it yesterday.
Are you trying to say my app is outdated? I just downloaded the new app.
No, I'm sorry. At the end of the day, your app is outdated.
You can't entirely trust the mainstream media, the BBC especially. That's another thing I'll say. In the next coming weeks or so, when you read if you take the time to read the newspapers, read the what's on the internet, be very skeptical, especially skeptical with the BBC and the Guardian and the Independent, the so-called liberal newspapers, who ask for intervention.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
You know we know each other, so there's no issue. Don't get. I like this guy. Don't get. We're not offending each
No,
other.
no, of course not. I'm not taking offence.
The issue is, though, you're talking about this demonstration tomorrow is ban the war. What war?
Stop
are we
the
talking
war.
about? Stop the war for what?
Well, it's organised by Stop the War Coalition. And
Stop which war?
The name of the demonstration is Stop the Rush to War with Syria, Don't Bomb Syria.
All right, so it's about the war that's going on in Syria. Okay.
When is it?
We're not listening
Tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. out on Parliament Square. There was a demonstration recently outside Downing Street, which went very well. You had the Veterans for Peace there.
We had to do it across the road. We couldn't even get close to the gates, and I think that was really
Let's
ineffective.
go and stand under
We can have a tactical discussion about how non-violent action works. The thing about non-violent action
obviously
is that
non-violent,
it's
but
not
at
always
least
100% effective.
Yeah,
but
the
at least
chance-
it's something. It's better than nothing. It's better than sitting at home and watching a soap opera. When you could
agree,
be out there
but at
actually
least-
contributing to the safety of the British people. Theresa May she has utter contempt for British values. If British values are supposedly peace, justice, humanitarian concern, she has utter contempt for that. She doesn't mind, Saudi Arabia creating another humanitarian disaster in Yemen. She doesn't mind British bombs dropping on Yemen. She doesn't care about that. She really doesn't. She doesn't mind that we could be taking more Syrian refugees than we're already taking, but we're not really taking enough. If she really cared about humanitarian concern, she would at least said to the Saudi Arabian government, listen, stop your attacks, stop using our bombs to bomb the Yemeni civilians. So at the very least, she might even say to Israel,
Why doesn't she?
stop the illegal occupation.
Because there's no ethics in business.
Speak out, and she would have spoken out against that.
doesn't
Speak
she?
out against
Why do you
the,
think she
the
doesn't?
sniping in the back of an 18-year-old boy running
you
away
think
from a
she
fence
doesn't?
by the Israeli army.
Why do you think she does?
Because she doesn't have the power to say no.
The fact is that power doesn't corrupt, but power does attract corrupted people. And
Why do you
Theresa
think
May
she
is a
doesn't?
corrupted person.
Why do you think she doesn't?
She is
do that?
utterly corrupted.
Why do you think she doesn't do that?
Why do you think she doesn't do what?
Stop. Why do you think she doesn't tell?
She's a
Saudi
corrupted
Arabia?
person.
Why do you think she doesn't tell Saudi Arabia to stop bombing?
Like I said, because she's a corrupted person.
What do you mean corrupted? What she likes a load of Yemenis getting bombed. She says,
No, do you know what it is?
I don't
Another
think
load
she
of
ticks her off.
It's actually even worse than that.
Involved.
Can I just say, it's even worse than she doesn't care about. She doesn't even recognize him as even being a concern at all. It's like, for example, when Bill Clinton did something similar to what Theresa May is doing now. When Bill Clinton was having domestic problems at home.
I wonder what they were.
Yeah, and not just that.
He didn't inhale.
Not just that
though.
affair.
He didn't inhale.
Aside from that, even he actually bombed a chemical plant in Sudan, right? He bombed a chemical plant, and he didn't even care that there were civilians who were killed by that. They weren't even. The fact is that the British government they see a lot of people around the world as unpeople, to use an Orwellian person. Yeah, they do. They honestly do.
Do you know why they let Saudi Arabia get on with it? Do you know why? Because Saudi Arabia sells oil. So if she starts lecturing them on human rights and all this, they'll say, "Well, fuck you for oil. You ain't getting none."
Yes.
Actually, it's interesting. There was a
That's
member.
why.
There was a
These are
member.
difficult
There was a
choices
member
she
of the
has to
Tory.
make.
There was a member of the Tory party because this actually came to before Parliament. This issue of why are we supporting this brutal, bloody dictatorship?
they
Why?
supply us oil.
Hold on. Do you know what a Tory MP said? I can't remember his name now, but he said in Parliament, we should all MPs stop criticising Saudi Arabia because we won't have a market for arms otherwise. We have to stop. They might withdraw their custom from us. That says a lot about the Tory government. That says they're actually more interested in endangering the region. And can I just point out, British people generally don't like jihadi Islamist terrorism either. Generally speaking, they don't. Hold on. But you know that Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest funders and drivers of Wahhabi Salafi terrorism in the Middle East.
Labels and terrorists, terrorists, not labels. Islamic, not IRA. Terrorists and terrorists.
I said Islamist, not Islamic.
I missed death by the IRA by 1 minute.
It's not. I think you should take.
Terrorist is an evil person.
You should take
no, what the religion.
You should take a more nuanced view of it because
you're just dividing people.
No, you should take a more nuanced view of it.
You ain't take a nuanced view on May.
Yeah.
You just said, "Oh, she don't give a fuck about the people dying in Yemen." That's not
No,
a
she
nuanced
doesn't.
view.
If she did,
That's
she
not
would
your-
she
no,
would
she
call
has to
Saudi
make a
Arabia.
difficult choice. Well, I can lecture Saudi Arabia and sell them top blowing stuff, and in return we won't get oil, and then the whole fucking country collapses because the world runs on oil.
You know what, when I come here,
These
I'm
are
actually.
difficult choices she has to make. She don't go, "Oh, I don't really care." about
I'm
you
actually
at the
grateful
time."
for this kind of criticism when I go to Speaker's Corner and I speak. I like this kind of dialogue because what it does is it throws into relief a very clear choice. Like you said, there's a
It's
choice
not a
she's
clear
making,
choice.
but there's not a choice Theresa May just has to make. The British people in general have to make this choice. Are they willing to actually, watch their government support Saudi Arabia and other brutal dictatorships in the Gulf? Are they willing to do that? They have to ask themselves that question. Or they may be willing to try maybe more renewable energies so they don't have to rely on oil from that part of the world.
Renewable energy won't keep the country going.
Yeah, but was there an outcry by the British public when the Prince of Saudi Arabia was visiting UK compared to the
There should
outcry
have
when
been.
Donald Trump was visiting?
If there wasn't, there should have been.
Where was Sadiq Khan's exception about the?
There wasn't, and there
Salman
should.
guys?
There wasn't, and there should have been. There really should have been.
I think there should be a protest.
His name is Mohammed bin Salman, right? He should have had a huge. I remember seeing a really frightening billboard near my brother's house. We lived down in Chelsea. There was an underpass, and then on the billboard there was United Kingdoms, and there was a flag. There was the KSA flag and the United Kingdom flag. next to each other. And obviously they didn't show the sword part of the Saudi Arabian flag. They didn't show that part, but they showed the United Kingdoms. I don't want it to be a United Kingdom. We need to not only rethink our special relationship with Saudi Arabia, but definitely the one with the United
Don't want it
States.
to be a United Kingdom.
We need to no, not United Kingdom. Well, that
You just said I don't want it to be a United Kingdom.
if you're actually listening, you'd understand. Like,
yeah.
you should listen, so you can actually hear what I'm saying.
Can you imagine that?
So yeah, all of you tomorrow. Sorry, I keep repeating this for the people who haven't heard. Go to the demonstration tomorrow. Stop the War has organised a very worthwhile demonstration tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. outside Parliament Square. 5:30 p.m. Parliament Square tomorrow. Will be a demonstration against the bombing of Syria.
Russian embassy, for example.
If you care about holding the British government to account,
They're not involved. They're not involved in the war. They're refereeing it at the moment. They're not involved in the
they're
war.
not involved in the war. They've just done airstrikes.
They're refereeing it.
They've just done
Assad used
airstrikes.
chemical weapons, and
This
he
is
gets
like a referee
backhand.
going in and kicking the ball into a goal.
They're not involved in the civil war other than refereeing it.
No, they're not. They have been involved
If you
in the
want to
civil
stop the
war.
war, go to the Russian
You know that
embassy.
Britain has been illegally.
Tell them to stop
Britain is involved in the civil war. And this is another example of how shameful the mainstream media's coverage of this is. Britain and America have been supporting the Syrian opposition for many years now. Illegally. According to the UN, you're not allowed to support opposition groups in that country without that country's permission. You're not allowed to, and America did this in Nicaragua, backing the right-wing Contras against the Sandinista government. They set a horrible precedent that Britain is following, and I'm really ashamed of it. Now, one demonstration is not going to fix everything, I agree, but at least it's something, it's a start. And then from there, you can go on and read about, British foreign policy in general, get some historical context
If
to
you're
it.
talking about the Syrian war, it's not in the British government's power to end that war.
Neither should it be, even if it is, it shouldn't be.
Why are you protesting and telling them to do something?
I'm telling them not to bomb Syria, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
you do that, but that's got nothing
That's
to
what
do
the,
with
that's what
stopping
the protest was. I never said the protest was to put an end to the civil war in Syria. No, I never said it. It was organised by Stop the War Coalition, which came about because of the Iraq War. Sorry? Sorry, this gentleman is playing with semantics just to distract me. It's not actually. Can I have a genuine question from someone? No? All right. Well, I'll keep speaking then. I'll remind you again. 5:30 tomorrow. If you really want to send Theresa May the message that we're not going to be distracted by this foreign crisis, we're not going to forget about her failures in the recent general elections. We're not going to ignore the fact that even the Tories are waiting for a chance to stab her in the back. We're aware of how unpopular she is. Okay. We're aware of how unpopular she should. And honestly, over the Skripal case, I think Jeremy Corbyn should have called for her resignation. I think they should have called an emergency parliament, and he should have called for her resignation. That was utterly destructive. Sorry. Well, it would send a message that we're not going to allow our leaders to just fling accusations at countries without evidence. We don't have any evidence that Russia was behind the nerve gas.
No evidence whatsoever.
No evidence. There was all kinds of conspiracy theory speculation, which I'm actually open to personally. I don't mind doing that a bit. But there was no actual evidence. Before you accuse a country, you have to have evidence. We should have evidence. It's not just a question of morality, it's just a practical thing to do as a leader. If you want to look like a good leader, she cares about how she appears. She cares about the happiness of the British people. And not just the British people, a lot of you here are not British, but people, human beings in general, that she won't throw around accusations against a state like Russia, or any state, without having evidence first, without allowing for some kind of investigation into the situation. And even the chief of Port and Down, which analyses all these chemicals, said it probably wasn't from Russia. Well, he doesn't know. There's no way to know.
They didn't
That's what he
look
said.
into it.
They did look into it.
They didn't look into it. They found out what the substance was, and that's all they did.
They took a sample, and that says a lot
But it
about it
wasn't their
already.
job to
The
find
fact that
out
they
where
have
it
a
come
sample
from.
is interesting. It's not, and it wasn't even the Russian Federation that could develop this. It was the Soviet Union. This is why I call for a more nuanced idea of the world. It is worth distinguishing IRA from jihadi terrorists. It's also worth distinguishing Shia from Sunni terrorists as well.
Stop labelling people.
You say stop labeling, but
You
this is how we communicate.
Terrorist is a
We're
criminal.
human beings and we need language to
Whether it's
communicate.
Islamic or IRA or whatever, terrorist is a criminal. It's not.
Sure.
Stop
And you know what?
putting
The British government has some of the worst terrorists in the world. What we've done in Syria is an example of terrorism. It's not only an act of aggression; it's terrorism. It's trying to frighten a government into behaving a certain way. No, I think the Assad regime is morally disgraceful. I think the way Assad. But you know what? Ironically, that's breaking international law in order to try and do that. Like I said, you can only intervene in a country like that when either you're doing it in self-defense or you're doing it because the UN has resolved that it's allowed. Neither of those things have happened. Now, British people, again, generally care about international law. Most people around the world actually do, right? And this shows you how much utter contempt Theresa May has. Not only should you vote her out in the next election, you should go to the demonstration tomorrow and show how disgusted you are at this behaviour.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Honestly, I'll take the Lib Dems, if I had to, over Theresa May. Just the point is, we should send a message, though. Not only vote her out in the next general election. The thing is, a lot of people don't bother feeling angry at people like Theresa May because they think they're powerless. Why would I bother feeling angry if I can't do anything? Okay, voting someone out is not exactly, that revolutionary, but it's something. You can do something. You're given a little bit of power in this so-called democracy we have. You get to vote in the elite, the section of the elite you prefer, right? That's something, and you should use that power. Vote the fuck out of Theresa May. I mean, vote her the fuck out.
You know she's not going to stand for this.
Well,
You do know this.
well, if she does, vote her out. And don't vote for the Tories.
Tony Blair.
That'd be mob.
No, I'm not saying that the Tories are any better than the Labour government when it
saying.
comes to foreign policy. Labour has a disgusting record on foreign policy, not just the Iraq War,
So-
which might be the worst US foreign policy in history. The fact that we took
There's
that...
no alternative, is there, really?
There is an alternative. There's more. We could try more diplomatic channels, try to create some kind of regional ceasefire, all right? And in fact, maybe doing nothing might be good. But better than adding more
Be like
violence.
Hitler in the 30s. Just let him get on
No,
with it.
sorry. It's not a situation at all comparable to it.
No one died in those strikes that we know of.
The fact no one died. I agree. I don't know if. Well, they might have. We don't know. I'm not
as-
sure.
as-
I'm
now,
not
as
sure.
we speak,
even
no
if
one's known
even if
to have
no one
died.
died, it gives Assad and the nationalists who support him in Syria more of a mandate to actually clamp down on his people.
Yeah, less chemical weapons.
No, hold on. What happens is that when you have a government like that, they can use this propaganda that the West is attacking us to actually become even more dictatorial. They can use that to justify even more draconian, measures. Now, Syria is only marginally above North Korea in how it treats its civilians, but it could even get worse now. When the West attack, what happens is in times of war, the power of the state, the victim state in the case of Syria and the aggressor state in the case of the UK, both their power gets enhanced. Theresa May's power gets. She looks like a strong, stateswoman.
Strong and stable.
Right, strong and stable. Exactly, all that propaganda. Speaking of propaganda, sorry, this is not a very structured speech. Usually I try and give a bit more structure to my speeches so they're a bit more coherent, but to be honest, I'm too emotional about this. I can't really think in a structured way. The thing about Theresa May is she wants to appear like a strong stateswoman, and that's the propaganda, and the BBC is helping with that. The propaganda is giving her all kinds of
What the
legal
BBC done to her?
justifications. Sorry, there's been hardly any criticism of her attack. There's been more closer to a consensus in the BBC and the Guardian than anything, which I find is very worrying, personally.
No one's been on the BBC to criticise Theresa.
Sorry?
No one's been on the BBC to criticise Theresa May. That is that.
Personally, I haven't. Overwhelmingly, the BBC has supported Theresa May's attack on Syria. Overwhelmingly, they've tried to provide justification.
How's this been shown?
Well, just take a look. Just log into the BBC. Read the top 5 articles. and you'll
Normally
see
the
what I'm
BBC
talking
don't
about.
really give opinions, they just say what other people have said.
No, well,
unless you're
you have
telling
a
me
job
that the
as
guests that they've invited on have all supported Theresa May.
I'm not a journalist. I'm not going to pretend I am, but I know a little bit about journalism just from. It seems obvious to me. It might seem obvious to you. You're a journalist. Your job is not just to parrot what the elite says to the public, like
that's
some kind
exactly
of
what your
mouthpiece.
job is.
No, you're not.
You tell
You're not.
people
That's
what
not your job.
happened.
Your job is to be critical and think critically. And they even pride themselves on this, a lot of journalists, liberal journalists, on being crusaders for truth, right? They should just live up to that. They should live up to that ideal.
No, they
And
tell people
They should
what has
hold
happened.
Theresa May more to account.
They
Ask
tell
her,
people
why
what's
has Britain
happened.
not take more Syrian refugees? Why is Britain continuing in the humanitarian disaster in Yemen? Why is David Cameron not being held to account over destroying Libya? Why is he not being held to account over that? He should be. All of these. There's not a very critical position. on-
That's not what journalists do. They
Sorry?
don't judge other people's decisions.
What about
Blair.
Afghanistan and Yemen and Pakistan? I believe
It's
as
all
well.
one-sided, isn't
A lot has been made of the Yemeni humanitarian disaster. A lot has been made of that,
not
quite
weapons there,
rightfully.
was it?
A lot of civilians have died with British bombs and because of British training of that army. But you know what? A lot hasn't been made of. Since 2007, the British government has had drones operating from Menwith Hill in Yorkshire, attacking sites in Yemen, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan since 2007. That is illegal as well. You're not allowed to just go in and intervene in a country like that and bomb. So you're not even allowed to bomb terrorists without a specific mandate from either the UN or a justification of self-defense, which we don't have. All right. Now, Tony Blair tried desperately to fabricate evidence over the Iraq threat, that Saddam Hussein was a threat when he wasn't. He clearly wasn't a threat. He tried to fabricate that, and now he's been called out for that. A lot of people can see that he was lying, and there's a lot of distrust of him. The same hasn't been said of Theresa May. No one, I haven't heard anyone in the BBC say, wait a second, is she seriously saying that she has a legal justification for this? Now, Corbyn is wrong. It's not just legally questionable. He says it's legally questionable what she's doing. It's illegal. It's not only illegal, it's impractical. When you're a British government and you're violating international law like this, it doesn't make Britain look very good in the world's eyes. It doesn't make Britain seem like a very morally righteous country. Now, British people I think generally speaking, British people want to be seen that they're part of a country that obeys international law, that is trying to be peaceful and create peace, and is not willing to collaborate with Islamism, as in the case of Saudi Arabia. Most British people don't want that, as far as I know, the British people I've met. But yeah, Theresa May has utter contempt for that. She has. I keep repeating the same thing because it's worth repeating. Go to the demonstration tomorrow and show her that you will not stand by and accept that kind of message. Go and show. It's not much demonstrating. It could be a lot bigger. It could be strikes. There could be all kinds of ways of holding to account. But it's something at least. Stop the War Coalition, organise something. We should take advantage of that to the full. I think. You really should be angry if you're British. If you're just any human being. We should have a decent respect for the opinions of the Middle Eastern people. Hardly anybody's asked about Syria, the Syrian people, and what they think of this. Hardly any. I don't have anybody in the media who's asked what the Syrian people might think if Britain bombed. I don't know. I haven't seen it. There might be. There might be.
No one can go over there.
No one can go over there.
No one can go over there. No one goes anywhere. No Western journalist goes anywhere.
There's actually something. There's actually. No, they do. They actually do.
No, they
Reuters was pretty quick on the scene.
On the scene.
My father is a journalist and he's gone to Syria many times.
People can go.
Is he in the thick of it?
Beg your pardon?
Is he in the thick of it?
The middle of it.
This gentleman's making a good point. Actually, it is. Even if you do go to Syria and you report on the war, it's very difficult to see what's happening. In warfare, things move very quickly. Patrick Cockburn is a brilliant war reporter. Your father probably knows who this guy is. Patrick Cockburn is very worth reading. He's one of the few mainstream journalists who takes an honest look at warfare. He reported very accurately on the Libyan situation. And he knows it's difficult, because especially a lot of the time war journalists, including your father, might be embedded in military units for protection. And now it's very difficult to not empathize more with your protectors than you will with the people they might be shooting at. They're looking after you, so you're going to have a sense of, you are definitely going to be biased in their favor. The fact is, you should just be aware of that bias. It makes you more critical of the media. When you read the BBC or the Guardian, you can just think a bit more critically of their reporting. So you make. I don't agree with you, but you make.
You keep saying BBC's full of propaganda. Give me an example.
It is one of the worst propaganda agencies in the world. It is one of the worst propaganda agencies in the world.
Can I have an example?
Do you remember? I don't know if any of you remember. I was very young at the time. I didn't really give a hoot about the BBC, except maybe watching CBeebies. I don't know. But when I was watching the BBC later on, I saw a video of Andrew Marr talking about Blair having attacked Baghdad, saying he's now a stronger man and a stronger prime minister. He took on public opinion, right? Even Andrew Marr later went back on that, and he said that was a really bad speech. I shouldn't have said that. The heads of the BBC even realised that it's not, and it's the same in the question of Israel as well. There was actually a BBC journalist who left the BBC because of how clearly propagandist it was in favour of Israel and against the Palestinian people. He couldn't stand it. He had to actually. Oh, and by the way, there's something called, if you're interested, there's something called the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, and they have activists on the ground and they go there. It's based in the United Kingdom, and you can read their reports.
How far is the United Kingdom from Syria?
Well, they have contacts with activists working in Syria. We don't know
activists.
Who did. Yeah,
not journalists, not impartial observers. Activists.
Journalists are not impartial observers. But by the very
you'll find it.
By the very fact that they're sitting in one place in time and looking at one image in front of them, that's impartial. The fact that they're not God, they can't see everything. I think a lot of people in Britain, they think that the media is some kind of transparent media.
No, I think everyone thinks it's a propaganda machine,
not.
although you can't give an example of it.
BBC is utterly propagandist.
Give this example. If it's
I've just given you the example.
it should be easy to demonstrate.
You're not giving an example of how it's propagandist, but you're giving a good reason why. There's a big threat of having their TV license taken away.
Yep.
That and enough isn't enough to make them a mouthpiece for the British warmongers in the state. That's enough. That is in itself enough. Just be sceptical about the propaganda in the liberal media.
Propaganda?
I said the Guardian, the Independent,
Example of
the
this
BBC.
propaganda that still ain't had.
Have you seen any serious criticism of Theresa May's illegality of the war?
It's not the BBC's business to criticise. It's the business of the BBC to say what is happening.
Can I give you?
If, for example, Trump says, "Oh, mission accomplished," it isn't the BBC's job to say, "Oh, he's talking bollocks." No,
Excuse
it's
me,
his
it is.
job. No, it isn't.
If you're
it's
a
his
journalist-
job to say
if you're a
Trump
journalist-
has said mission accomplished,
If you're a
and then
journalist-
they invite pundits on to pull it to pieces. That's how it works.
If you're a journalist,
they
you
don't
have to
say
hold
they
people
don't
to
say,
account.
"Oh, Trump's lying. We're not going to report that."
That's
no,
what
no,
a journalist
it's
is
their job.
supposed to
a
do.
leader of the United States has said mission
What is it?
accomplished. They report that Trump has said mission
Would you like
accomplished.
to, would you like
It's
to
not
get up
the-
and give your... Get up and
Everyone can
speak.
hear me, can't they?
Good idea. Let him speak.
I just want an example. I'm open to the fact that BBC is a propaganda machine. He makes a very good point. It's funded by the government, which makes issues better. I just want an example of it. That's all.
I've just given you an example with Blair and Andrew Marr, who was the head of the BBC at the time.
It's hard to really put one specific example, basically.
Well, hang on. He said it was loaded with propaganda.
It's absolutely propaganda.
It's absolutely propaganda. So give me an example of it.
I just
one,
gave you the example,
just one,
Blair.
Just one.
I think we're going around in circles a little bit here.
Because I don't have my example yet.
I've just given you the example of Blair and
Hurry up, Blair.
Blair support. Sorry, Andrew Marr. The video is even on YouTube. Andrew Marr supported Blair when he bombed Baghdad and attacked
He was on the
Baghdad.
BBC at the time.
He was on the BBC. He was on the BBC.
So you come up with one.
All right, another example. Fine. Let's think of it. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of British press and broadcasting, but it's worth reading books like Guardians of Power, Newspeak in the 20th century. They're chock full of examples. But I'm just going to think of one off the top of my head. I don't remember seeing any serious criticism of Britain's support for the Saudi regime in the
Owen
mainstream
Jones
media.
not turn up on the BBC and all he mentions is the Tory support.
Owen Jones.
Why do they have him on then?
Owen
If they're a
Jones,
propaganda machine.
Owen Jones is there are a place for the Owen Joneses and the George
No,
Monbiot's.
there definitely
Do you
is,
know what,
but
can
he
I-
gets invited
can I
onto the
explain?
BBC to say
Can I
exactly
explain?
that.
This kind of answers your question. They're the overwhelming minority of people, right? Overwhelming. They're there really as a token gesture, and they're basically there to say you can go that far left. You can go that far left. If you go any further, no, you're outside of acceptable opinion. You're outside of. You can go that far, right? And they're only given a space to actually speak because they're nearly always the most popular journalists for those newspapers. Overwhelmingly, The Guardian relies on most of its revenue from advertisers, right? So it can't actually, for one thing, it can't piss off advertisers too much. So that already gives you a bias. Another thing is that it relies overwhelmingly on the government and business for its sources, and it can't piss off its sources, right, in government. So it doesn't give too much of a critical view on that. All of these biases, they affect the way the media operates. It's very easy to criticize Russia and Syria, and it's worth criticizing those regimes. Like I said, Syrian regime, absolutely reprehensible. But it makes more sense to focus on what your government is doing to add more crime and more violence in the world. Because you can do something about your government, all right, directly. You can either vote them out, or you can demonstrate. Or you can write and speak like I'm speaking at Speaker's Corner. It's something. It's not going to change the world, public speaking and symbolic protest, but it's something. It's better than nothing. You know, you should stand up, and if you think something's wrong, you should say it's wrong. The thing about you said about it's just their job to parrot or just to say what.
Not parrot.
It is
a
parroting.
journalist. It's
Right.
a journalist's job to report what has happened.
Right.
And I give you an example of that with Donald Trump, for example. Donald Trump comes out and says mission accomplished. The BBC comes out and says Donald Trump has said mission accomplished. It ain't their job to say this idiot's lying
is their
to you.
job.
It ain't their
It
job.
is their
They
job.
can invite pundits on, like Owen Jones, for example, who can then provide opinion on what the BBC has reported to have happened, and they do. They often, whenever there's a topic on, they invite two people, one left wing, one right wing, and they both give their opinion. And that's the best that they can do for impartiality.
No, it's not the best
But it's
they
not
can
a newsreader's
and they
job to
shouldn't-
say this has happened, but it's rubbish.
Not only is impartiality impossible, and not only does the BBC come nowhere close to impartiality as much as it claims to be, it's better to be partial in favour of compassion and respect for international law, which they're not. I haven't seen a serious critique of the illegality of the British government's intervention into Syria. I haven't seen it serious.
How
I
long
haven't
did
seen
it
it serious.
happen? It happened 24 hours ago. You'll hear
And it is the job of journalists to be critical and to hold leaders to account. They're not just supposed to say what the government is saying and then invite various academics, which themselves often bias as well, keep that in mind, onto the show. That's not their job at all. They should be critical and they should crusade for truth. Right? They should
that's
speak
activism. That's not
speak
journalism.
truth to power.
That's
That is
activism.
what.
That's not journalism.
It's not about being an activist. It's about being an intellectual. Any intellectual, working
the
as a
journalist
journalist,
says
an
what
academic,
happens.
whatever. They should hold the people in power to account. They should hold them to
That's
account.
not
They should
what
ask them the
that's not a
questions.
journalist's job.
They should ask the simple question. Wait a second. Theresa May intervening in Syria on humanitarian grounds. Well, then why doesn't she intervene in, say, Saudi Arabia on humanitarian grounds?
Then they'll stop selling us oil. That's
why doesn't she bomb Riyadh? No, but I haven't even heard the question raised. I haven't even heard the question raised.
Everyone with any sense knows the answer to that.
Here's the thing with Syria, though. We have no interest in Syria. There's nothing we can ever gain from intervention.
But who do you mean by we?
As a nation. So
There is.
No, what?
There is.
If you can tell me.
Iran and Qatar. I heard this on LBC from an Australian newspaper. Iran and Qatar want to put a gas pipe through Syria to supply Europe with oil. The Russians obviously don't want that because they want to supply Europe. Sorry, not oil, with gas. So I'm presuming the British government's position is they'd rather not give more gas power to Russia. They'd rather have Iran and Qatar.
It might be. That's actually that's a very interesting point to make. That might be the reason why. I think it's also literally it's Theresa May's own hubris and thinking she can distract the British people from her own failings at home. I think that's as well a big reason. Bill Clinton did the same thing when he was in power and he bombed that chemical factory in Sudan. Sorry?
Pretty much every leader does the same thing. I
don't know if it's the reason with Donald Trump. I don't know if that's the reason with Donald Trump. I don't think he has to. I don't think he feels the need to. But I think Emmanuel Macron and Theresa May do feel the need to distract from their failings at home. And that's why they're doing this.
What
they're trying to externalize it.
If this hadn't happened, what would be the headline?
I just gave you two examples. So recent failings in the general elections, she did absolutely.
That was months ago. Have we not been through all that?
Hold on. The second one is a growing unpopularity with their own party as well.
They're seeing months ago.
Yeah, but
what would be the headline? If this hadn't happened, what would be the headline?
She was ridiculed almost in every newspaper.
Outside the party, I think increased.
Her popularity?
Yes.
Is it because of the strikes, the airstrikes? I wouldn't say so. I don't think she's going to be very popular because of that.
That hasn't had a chance to kind of like work its way through. Just for, the people you speak to, yes, they're quite happy with it.
I don't think so. If you look at the public opinion polls I've read, I'm not saying you should trust public opinion polls 100%. It's worth being skeptical about them as well. But 22% of the British people were against. Only 22% of the British people were in favour, right? That says a lot in itself.
So she's distracted from her failings by doing something the British people
She's got onto contempt for British. Well, she doesn't have to give a shit. She doesn't have to.
Well, hang on, you said your argument was she's done this to distract from her failings, and then you've given the argument that the British people don't want
She's failed.
This.
That's what I think.
So it's going to make her look even worse.
I think that's what her intentions were. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that's what her intentions were. Right? Now, I think it's going to fail. I think British people are tired of state intervention into other states, illegal intervention. Yes. I think they're tired of that. And they know that it increases the chances of terrorism. The Iraqi invasion is what gave rise to ISIS. All right, a lot of people know this. It's common sense.
And the migrant crisis.
Even the head of MI6 realised that. Stella Remington. She thought, well, it gave them an opening. Whatever you think of getting rid of Saddam Hussein, she said, you have to acknowledge it gave a vacuum of power to ISIS. In Libya as well, one of the major reasons for the rise of Boko Haram in West Africa is because of the vacuum left in Libya by the fall of Gaddafi. And a man, again, very distasteful man, like I said, but did he deserve to be stabbed in the ass like that and brutally tortured before he died? Did he really? Does any human being deserve that? No, of course not. All right.
Killed so many other people. It's the biggest issue.
Take the overview. The overview is the military-industrial complex, right, of America and the Russians. They've both got their military-industrial complexes, which require absolute devastation of countries. Because once you get a devastation of a country, then you can go in there and you can put everything in, from the sewers to the Wi-Fi.
Content over everything! Content over everything! From your government! Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to
prove the point that dogs are not violent, dogs are dogs. It's the person who's got the lead. It's the same thing as a gun. If a gun's in a drawer, is it really dangerous?
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you, I had no problem with your actions on the day.
Yeah, but people I still got a lot of stick because people said you come down to set the dog on idiot. That is weird.
No, but what it is, I just said you will do based on circumstances. Yeah? But what you did with Blade Runner was fine.
But you know what I'm saying? You know how easy it is that someone could just quickly get labelled for, and it's totally innocent.
Yeah, but you see,